The closest thing I could come to anything like an educated guess about what might have motivated Steve to spark-plug the NLA into existence must come from my own experience with the Society of Janus, which I've been involved with since 1974 when I was 28 years old. Now, the Society of Janus was begun and run by a hip woman named Cynthia Slater. In 1972 or 3, she ran a 2-line ad in the classified section of a counterculture, leftist, sort of bohemian-type newspaper called the Berkeley Barb of Berkeley, California fame. I lived in San Francisco at the time, and while waiting for a haircut in a San Francisco barbershop, I picked up a tattered copy of the Berkeley Barb to see if the classified ads might have anything racy in them or not. And buried way in the back of the Barb, I saw the ad, which read something like 2 lines. Meeting in San Francisco for S&M and B&D fans. Call, and there was a phone number. I called the number and I spoke to a husky-voiced woman. She sounded like Lauren Bacall, I swear, who interviewed me over the phone, after which time she gave me an address in a suburban part of San Francisco, and a few weeks later, on the appointed evening, I arrived for the meeting in her living room and walked into a fairly big and empty living room in which were seated with their backs to the wall about 12 men and 8 women, none of whom seemed gay to me. As it turned out, I was the first gay man ever to respond to the ad that Cynthia had placed. And that was the 4th such meeting she'd held. Everyone there seemed nervous as hell. And I later found out that many of the people in that living room had feared they might be arrested for attending such a meeting for fans of BDSM. And some weren't at all certain that the ad in the Barb wasn't really a trap devised by the Vice Squad. All that in San Francisco, for God's sake, in 1973, a city which had a long reputation as one of the bawdiest of all US cities. People were that scared. Anyway, we were all asked to introduce ourselves with or without a name, and to say as much as we wished about why we had chosen to attend the meeting. Cynthia went first and was the only person to give her first name. I was the only person in the room to give my first and last name, something that others found kind of shocking. It quickly became evident that I knew way more about BDSM than anyone in the room, so the evening kind of turned into an ask guy about anything kinky. I stayed after the meeting, and Cynthia and I began to brainstorm a possible series of workshops that we might offer the people who had left contact information. Long story short, I soon thereafter introduced a bunch of my gay BDSM buddies to Cynthia, and we became the first core faculty for the Society of Janus. Jim Kane, Skip Aiken, Don Meeson, John Fleiter, myself, and others. And soon after, we added some BDSM women that I knew, Pat Califia, Gail Rubin, Dossie Easton, among others. And some of these, myself included, became the first board of directors for the Society of Janus in 1974, when it had become too big for Cynthia to manage effectively by herself. I knew that group very well. And one thing we all had in common was our desire to share the gay wealth of BDSM knowledge with het people in Janus who were, quite frankly, starved for the information that we all took pretty much for granted as business as usual. Now, I gotta believe that the same things motivated Steve Madoff and the other gay men that he inspired in the establishment of the NLA. Now, what you probably do not know is that I'm a guy whose Italian Catholic mother threw me out of the house a week after I graduated from high school, saying, "I don't want any homosexual living under my roof. You've got a week to pack your things and get out." And so, quite naturally, I fled into the welcome arms of gay male culture at the age of 18, and by age 19 I had found my real family of choice among my gay male leather and BDSM brothers in nearby Denver. Like them, I worked in disguise in the straight world by day, and in my case as a brakeman for the Union Pacific Railroad Company, but by night and on weekends I was a leather teenager with lots of older kinky gay brothers. The year was 1965. So none of you will be surprised to learn that 9 years after that, when I had, by accident really, stumbled upon a group of straight men and women who not only approved of me for being exactly who and what I am, and was way back then only younger, of course. Well, it felt great to be wanted, and it felt great to be valued and respected by straight men and women for the knowledge and insight I could give them. And suddenly, for the first time in my life, I had value in the straight world. But there is another way to see the sequence of events which I've just shared with you. I've thought about it a lot, and although it's true that I have a basically generous nature and am a survivor of the human potential movement of the 1960s, what's also true is that my own shame about being different was, and has been for a long time, in search of enough approval to either make that shame go away or to make it not matter anymore. The really short version of that is that I've come to suspect that I've tried for way too long to trade information for respect, specifically from the straight world. Now, you'd think that a smart psychotherapist might have figured this out about himself when he was in graduate school, but he'd be wrong. Shame about being different, as it turns out, is capable of making us do some very strange things. For example, I've wondered why kinky gay men just basically do not use what we call scene names. But tons of het folks do. And when I ask, I get answers like, well, I have children or family who don't know what I'm into. Or, well, I have a professional job or a license with the state. And I gotta remind you that gay men have children, and we have families, and we have jobs, and we have licenses too. I'm a psychotherapist licensed in the state of California since 1983. And while I have no children of my own, I do have nieces. I do have nephews. I even have grandnieces and grandnephews. And I have never used a scene name, and I have never been struck by professional lightning.